Welcome to the Cash Flow Project Podcast. Are you looking to better your financial situation by increasing your cash flow? Too busy to hunt for real estate deals or don't know where to start? Then you're in the right spot. Join us as we dive in and talk about investing for cash flow using multifamily real estate.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Project. I'm your host, Vince Gethings from Tri-City Equity Group. And today we have Barry Rutten on the show. Barry is a admitted industry contrarian in the financial industry, which is, kind of going against the grain there. He has 28 years of experience as a certified financial planner and is the co-founder of Wealth Defense Financial Advisors, who focus on the unique needs and goals of business owners, high-income professionals, and upwardly mobile families, real estate investors, and those entering and already in retirement. Barry, we talked a little bit before going live here. I'm super excited about the topics of this show, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Vincent. I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to it.
Cool. So before we get started, do you have anything you kind of want to expand on the background on kind of where you are in your business here or your career and maybe the market?
Well, I kind of like to explain the contrarian thing because it's not contrarian just to be ornery and difficult. It's just that I've been in the industry for 35 years, like as you shared, certified financial planner for 28 of those, obviously met with thousands and thousands of people, been around and alive enough, long enough to actually see market cycles, kind of like with the ones we're starting to enter now here in May of 22, where things are starting to shift a different direction. And, for a lot of people, they've only experienced, bull markets and in both equities and bonds, for example. And, we're going through some changes. But I think contrarian, just in the sense of if you follow the conventional wisdom, you're going to get the conventional result. And a lot of the world is set up to pretty much keep you in the conventional result. That it serves a lot of industries for you to just sort of stay in the lane and do your thing that they want you to do so that they do well. And that could be banks, it could be insurance companies, it could be Wall Street. A whole host of entities are really set up to promote thoughts and ideas and actions that may not serve people really well. And so I just simply try to shine a light on that, put a mirror up to that, and really ask some tough questions and saying, is this really getting you where you want to go? Do you understand the consequences of those decisions? And is there an alternative path that's more beneficial?
Great. What are some of examples of the conventional wisdom and conventional results that people might just have blind spots to?
Sure. Well, a couple. Let's use one that's, sort of probably near and dear to your heart because it's a real estate example. And that is the 30-year mortgage versus the 15-year mortgage. And of course, I'm not giving advice here. Everybody's situation is different. But the idea of paying off your mortgage quicker, right? Or sending more money into the bank to pay off your mortgage quicker. The bank takes in deposits at a very, very low cost of funds, right? They pay, especially now, right? They pay you 0.1% or something, and then turn around and lend it at even, 3 or 4%, now moving towards 5. That's tens of thousands of percent more. I mean, it's a huge amount. And then if they can encourage you, and they package that up and sell that off to Wall Street, and they sell that as a mortgage security to free up more capital. And now if you'll give them more money back faster, they can turn around and lend that out again. And so I'll give you a specific numerical example. If somebody's earning 0.1% on their savings, but the bank is lending that money out at 4%, they're earning 3,900% more interest on your money. Well, why aren't you doing that for yourself? You can't, the phrase I like to use is you can't eat your shingles, right, in your house. So if you put more money into the equity of your home, equity itself has zero rate of return. You're not paid for equity. Equity moves with market forces, right? As markets go up or down, that's the value of your home goes up or down, but there's no sort of cash flow from your house along the way. It has a zero rate of return. So instead of prepaying your mortgage down early and giving that valuable hard-earned cash that you brought into the bank for them to go out and earn 3,900% more interest. Why not retain that money for yourself and have it do, a bunch of different things? Have it be a source of emergency or opportunity funds, turn around and lend it back to somebody else, right? So instead of giving your equity back to the bank, your equity prepayments, I should say, back to the bank, what if you held on to it and then you worked with somebody who was a real estate investor, say a fix and flipper person, and said, hey, I'll loan you this money for, 10%. You fix and flip your house in 6 months, and you get your profit and I get my interest, and we're happy. So at least now you're using that effectively. And the truth of the matter is, very few people stay in one house for the entire duration of their home ownership period, right? So you'll pay that loan off at whatever time you want. But let's just say all I did was take the money that I was going to send to the bank and stored it somewhere, earned a little bit of rate of return on it. 15 years from now, I can decide to take that money, write a check, and pay off the mortgage. I've accomplished the same thing. But along the way, I've had access to that money to do whatever I needed to do in my life, emergency, opportunity, make a purchase, buy something, whatever. I just don't want you to put it back in the hands of the bank. And I'm not saying banks are evil, but they kind of are. They're in business to make money, and they have a really good model. Hey, in exchange for us keeping your money safe, we're going to go out and use your money to make us really, really wealthy. Well, my contention is, why doesn't the client make themselves wealthy? So that's one good example. I don't know if that's helpful to your listeners, but that's the one I tend to get all hot and bothered about.
Oh, that was a really good one. And I just took notice of something. I'm gonna borrow this, make a post out of it later. But equity has a 0 rate of return. Really stuck with me. And a lot of people don't realize that. Like, sure, they like doing their personal financial statement or personal balance sheet, and they're like, wow, they see a big number of whatever their net worth is. And but a lot of times you can't, like you said, you can't eat your net worth, right? It's like you can't eat off that. It's like just because you have whatever, a couple $100,000 in equity in your house, that's not providing cash flow. Like, sure, you can go get a HELOC on it, but a HELOC, a lot of people get confused on what a HELOC is. HELOC's just debt. It's just another debt instrument. So it's not cash flow. It's like you're gonna have to repay that at some point. So I definitely like that. Your thoughts on one of those biggest ones. We always hear from financial entertainers the 15-year versus the 30-year, and pay off all your debt and everything like that. So I like having a specific example of why that is maybe not the best for everybody. Is you have to get, do a little bit of education, look at the opportunity cost of your funds, and see if, the 15-year for that example is the best, way to deploy that capital. What are some other hidden dangers that you've seen from getting advice from like TV show hosts or radio hosts that over the last 30 years, whatever the hot, trend is with financial planning and financial advice?
Well, I think the thing that drives me crazy, and I'm glad you used the term financial entertainers. It's a term I share as well. And that is, again, if you look below the surface, and I'm not going to name names, I think everybody knows who the big names are on, talk radio. If you look below the surface and say, okay, what is their business model? So just a moment ago, I spoke about the business model of the bank. Take in savings, pay a small amount of interest, use the capital to invest as loans, because right, for banks, loans are their assets, not savings deposits. So what's the role of the drive time talk radio financial program host? Sell advertising. That's it. That's their job. Their job is to keep your ears, and if they happen to be on TV, your eyeballs, glued to the radio long enough so that when the commercial break happens, you will listen to the commercial so that the advertisers continue to advertise and the radio station gets paid, and that you'll stay for them to return and continue to listen. So the longer the listener stays with the program, the longer the happier the advertisers will be, and the more they'll pay for their ads. So that's their motivation. It is impossible. I mean, incredibly impossible for someone to say, hey, here's my situation in 12 seconds, which is, you can't explain anybody's situation, whether that's numbers or background or history, in the short amount of time they give you to say, hey, what's up? And then if you think about it, the caller is just sort of fodder for the host to rage against the machine, to make a big fuss about something that are their hot button issues. So, for example, there's one finance talk radio personality who rages against a particular type of life insurance, and that makes for it a really evil target, and it gets everybody hot and bothered, and everybody are all worked up. Well, a few minutes ago, you used the term opportunity cost. So let's tie a few things together. What they don't talk about is the fact that you actually, and I don't in any way in this kind of setting or format ever give advice. This is just a concept to share. There are strategies that you can use where you could actually be earning a very good, safe money return. Let's just say 3 or 4%, 5%. And then use those dollars as collateral for a very low interest loan to go out and do something like make a real estate investment. And then since the real estate transaction will have its own rate of return, and the money that's in the account that you used to collateralize the loan has its own rate of return, you're earning 2 rates of return. And therefore, there is no opportunity cost, right? Because as soon as I take money from location A and put it into location B, whatever location B gives me is what my opportunity is, but it came out of location A, and now whatever that was doing for me is gone. But what if I can be in the same place at the same time and use the money in one location as collateral for a loan at, say, 2% to go out and make a real estate investment where my cash on cash return might be 20%. And now I can add those two things together. Well, there's an aspect to life insurance. And again, I'm not promoting a product here. I'm just saying there's an aspect to life insurance that allows you to do exactly what I just described. So it's great for the financial host, the financial entertainer, to rage against that machine of, oh, all life insurance is evil. And everybody who follows that and go, oh, yeah, it's evil, I shouldn't do that, misses out on that massive opportunity that they could be doing, or at least leaving their mind open to being exposed to that concept. And then those people never get to enjoy that opportunity. And that's really a shame. So that's why I think it just doesn't make sense. If you want to be entertained and listen to the sort of the train wreck stories of people's finances on radio while you're stuck in traffic, great. But don't think of that as that's where I'll get advice, or that I'll act on that advice, without really understanding the true, full, broad spectrum landscape of what's possible when you kind of scratch below the surface.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the infinite banking system and dual asset strategy for life insurance is kind of what you're describing there. Or that is what you're describing there. And, that is something that really opened my eyes, especially like this, the original books, like the Nelson Nash, like Be Your Own Banker. I read that 2 years ago and I was like, holy crap, how does this exist? Right. It's like, and then you read another book. I think the other one was like, What Would the Rockefellers Do? I forget that author is like Garrett Gunderson or something. And then there's like there's another book. So there's like,
there's probably 30 books have been written about this topic.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. About the infinite banks. And so it's like one thing. It's like, okay. And then once I start getting bringing this stuff up to my mentors that are uber successful, like decamillionaires, centimillionaires. We've got one billionaire that we speak to every once in a while. And it's like that stuff is like elementary to them. It's like, of course I have, I got them, my grandkids got them, everybody in my family has them.
Right.
And it's like, it's like this big, like scary topic for people that just don't know. Cause again, they're stuck in that conventional wisdom kind of treadmill, that it's like, you talk to this, this centimillion over here. And he's like, yeah, of course. Every time a kid's born, first thing we do is go get a whole life policy and dual asset strategy, that thing, and make the trust the beneficiary. It's like, it's not even a thought. It's, so it's the strategy again, why the rich families, where this old money stays from, or how this old money kind of gets sustained. These families just go generation after generation. This is a very, very integral part of that strategy for, these big families.
I'm so glad you have that background and that exposure to these ideas. Yeah. What I want to do is just drill down just one more level here. So you're uber wealthy person. In their thought process, now that they understand that, they're not only an advocate of it for themselves, but they're an advocate of essentially creating an early start to wealth building for their children and grandchildren, right? So once they become fully aware of the power of it, they then want that for other people they love and care about, right? And they're completely immune to whatever the noise is over here. Now, the reality is the noise, believe it or not, even though I just kind of trashed them a little bit, the noise is correct to the extent that an uninformed advisor setting up those policies incorrectly in an old traditional kind of way, using the wrong product and the wrong design, will actually cause the client harm. And the kind of, infinite banking type policies that you mentioned, set up with the right companies, the right way, with the right structure, funded properly, are amazing, right? So you could just label it and say, oh, there's a couple of different ways to do this, but let's use whole life as an example. I could set up a whole life policy the wrong, old, traditional, standard way and never realize the benefits because the advisor isn't aware of how to do it. Or I could set up the right way and get all of the benefits to the extent that it might actually make me really wealthy, like some of the folks that you're working with. So if somebody comes out and makes this blanket statement like X is bad, and your brain now just says, oh, I'm not going to listen to that at all, you're probably never going to become the Deca millionaire. I'm not saying that's the only path to it, but there's a reason those people in that space have come to recognize how powerful that kind of dual bucket strategy is. And that's what's painful to me. And that's why I kind of position myself as a contrarian. I'm just a contrarian to conventional thought and conventional, I think, manipulation of the public into just kind of doing their role and not questioning, and then really kind of coming up really short and never really building wealth. And, my company is called Wealth Defense Financial Advisors. I believe in building and defending wealth from all the unnecessary things that erode it and can take it away or prevent it from even occurring in the first place. So I do get a little hot and bothered about those kind of topics.
No, it's good. I love the passion. So speaking of like financial advisors, they're not all created or the same or whatever the analogy is. And my example is when I was 22 in the military, I was just had my first kid. That's what it was. So I just got back from a deployment, had my first kid, and I was like, all right, I'm going to set everything up right. I'm going to do it right. Set my kid up right, set my family up right. So I go walk off the street to, one of the big brands that are, on every street corner and every shopping mall for financial advisors. And I didn't know any better. I walked out of there, thinking I was doing some great stuff. And I was, something is better than nothing, right? But,
sure.
6 months, 8 months in, as I'm, again, consuming material, consuming education, and I realized that these guys that I went with, really don't have, I just got my best interest in mind. They really don't have my goals or what I'm trying to do or help me toward my goals. They have their box of cookie cutter mutual funds that they're going to sell me whatever one's given the highest commission. And that's essentially the treatment I got. And at the time I didn't know any better. But after a year of being in these mutual funds, I'm like, wow, this is I could literally just put everything in a S&P 500 ETF, and I would have more than doubled the return on this. And just other things, there's no kind of personal to it. It's just here's, you get cookie cutter plan A, right? Give me a check, see you later. And I kind of emptied everything out, closed all that out. And I was like, okay, from now on, I'm going to be a lot more intentional and ask better questions. So my question to you is, what for somebody looking for a financial advisor, maybe a new one or their first one, what are some of the things that they should look for? What are some of the questions they should ask? Because it could be pretty intimidating, right? They're going to go to this person they never met and spill their most, sensitive kind of information to them. And hopefully this person has their best interest in mind. So what kind of advice do you have for them?
Well, I think you're describing a very common set of circumstances that a lot of people face, is that you sort of get to a point in your life where you're like, maybe I should hold on to a few of these dollars I'm making. Where should I go? What should I do? And a lot of times they have been exposed, sort of just maybe some of these multi-location firms where your eyes have seen them enough and you're thinking, well, maybe that's where I should go. I actually started out in law school, and I didn't finish. It just wasn't a good fit for me, but I've always obviously had a very professional orientation to my life. And I purposely switched to financial planning. So I think that's one important aspect, is that is this person truly a financial planner, or are they a transactional salesperson? I've held my certified financial planner designation for 28 years. It's the most rigorous coursework in the industry. It has a very comprehensive, both educational component, testing component, ethics component, and it's held to a fiduciary standard. And that's a really important thing for people to understand. A fiduciary standard is that the client's best interests are put first and foremost, with no relationship to anything that affects the advisor. And so you have to provide full and fair disclosure and explain both the pros and cons, and do your very level best to match their goals, objectives, circumstances to a particular situation. And there's no right answer. Fiduciary doesn't mean that there's one perfect answer, right? You could take the same fact set, the same client fact set, and two different well-educated, well-meaning financial planners could come to different conclusions, and they still may be still right for that client. One of the aspects that I think is really important is to separate advice from action. And all I mean by that is, when I engage with a client, if they want my knowledge, wisdom, education, advice, perspective, I charge a fee for that, just like your doctor. Your doctor has all that education, and you're asking, hey, this hurts, or what should I do? And there's a fee for that. Now, if the doctor says, hey, you should take this prescription, and you go get that prescription filled, or you need this surgery, well, the pharmacist is going to get paid, and the surgeon is going to get paid. But it's up to the patient in that case, or in this case, the client, to decide whether they want to take that action. And then, as the consumer of those services, they can certainly be made aware of the costs and benefits of different options. I have often felt that, again, being contrarian a little bit, the model of the industry where they charge a fee for assets under management generally aligns the advisor with the client. When things go up, the client is doing better, and the advisor is doing better, and vice versa. Things go down. But I've often felt, well, does the value of the advice really change because of the whims and whimsies of the market? Not really. And I've started to think about a model where it's simply an annual retainer, maybe based on income and net worth and such. And this way, the advice can stay completely pure, and the implementation of the client's financial plan, if that involves the selection and implementation of certain tools and vehicles and products and things, they're going to have their associated costs. But I really think that people would be well served to ask about the educational background. To cycle back to your original question, what educational background do they have? The terminology is thrown around really fast and loose, right? What education have? What standard do they operate their practice to? Is it a fiduciary standard, which again, I think is really important, not just a suitability standard. So like most brokers, for example, is just a suitability standard. Is it within a very broad range of net worth and income and assets and experience? Is this suitable? There are a lot of things are suitable. It doesn't mean they're optimal. And then, if it's just a one and done, like, hey, throw your money in here and never talk to you again, that's bad too, because things change and things shift. And so I also think there needs to be a personality fit. I really believe that style matters, approach matters. I tend to ask a lot of questions. I'm kind of curious by nature. And I think when you start to just ask people just facts and data questions, you miss a whole lot. There's a real person on the other side of the table with different backgrounds, frankly, different experiences with money from their parents, their grandparents, themselves. Spouses could have very different perspectives on money and how money is handled and goals and objectives. And so I like to ask a lot of questions about, well, let's just use, for example, how old are your children now, Vincent?
Put me on the spot. 9, 7, and 5.
I should have told you there was going to be a quiz and you needed to study.
Yeah, I was like, next thing would be like, what's your anniversary? And
right. So let's just say you and I are meeting, and you and me and your wife were meeting, and we were talking about college education for your children and paying for college education for your children. Well, a lot of people just go and assume that what the client wants to do is pay for 100% of everything: tuition, room, board, books, fees, a car, travel, whatever. Well, that might not be the feeling that both parents have. They may say, hey, I want my child to have more invested in their education. I want them to pay half, or I want them to have a promissory note that they'll pay back half after they graduate. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do this. And you may have had your college paid for by your parents or not. Your spouse may have had college paid for by her parents or not. And then you may have an opinion of, yeah, I didn't really take my college seriously. The kids are going to have some skin in the game, or it was great because I could really work on my studies. And so I want to do that for my kids. Well, if you don't ask people any of these things, if you don't ask them about these background issues, thoughts, and feelings, I've had so many clients turn to each other and go, oh, I didn't know you felt that way. Or I didn't know we thought differently about that. Or gosh, we haven't talked about that. So I see my role first and foremost as a conversational facilitator, to help a client have a conversation with themselves that they may not have gotten around to, may not know they should have, don't know what questions to ask, don't know what to do with the answers, and don't know how to necessarily interpret the information. A lot of people actually don't know themselves kind of from a money perspective. They just haven't been asked the right questions. And so I think a good test for someone looking for an advisor, excuse me, is just listen to the questions. Are they 5 minutes into it, getting a recommendation? You ask a couple of basic questions and, oh, I think you should do X. Or is it, more like 20 or 30 minutes of asking a lot of, questions in depth? And so I think you should use your gut instinct, right? Did this person really know me and ask about me? Or am I just set up for facts and figures and a check? And I think that's maybe the best test.
Yeah. And I think you said it there is like asking the right questions, or they don't know what questions should be asked. I think that's the one of the biggest signs of it, because if you've never had these conversations before, there's going to be topics or nuances that, again, you never thought of. So you need to get in front of somebody that is qualified enough to ask very in-depth questions, ask the right questions. And I think
it's interesting because, when you let's use that college as an example, parents generally think, okay, birth of the child, 18, build up some money, write a check to the tuition office, we're done. And I'm just not sure that's the right thought process around this whole thing. So if you had a student who took out student loans, they'd have to repay those student loans possibly over a really long time period, right? But they take that education pretty seriously and value it more, I think, if they had to pay some of it back. And so one of the things we'll do inside, we were talking about those strategically designed life insurance policies earlier, is to use the cash that's in them as collateral for loans to pay for tuition. So let's just say over the course of 18 years, you built up $100,000 and you write a check to the tuition office, 4 years in a row for $25,000, and you pay for the education. And remember, that's a loan against your policy's value, and the loan needs to be repaid. Well, who should repay the loan, right? Maybe we have the now graduate, hopefully now working former student, now somebody in the workforce. Instead of paying back a very difficult to pay off fully amortized student loan. So a federal student loan is a fully amortized loan, just like a mortgage. Really tough to pay off, right? Because it's all front loaded with interest. So the principal balance drops really slowly. What if instead of borrowing money from the government, the student borrowed money from what I like to call the First National Bank of mom and dad, right? So the First National Bank of mom and dad is very benevolent, has great repayment terms, right? So you can borrow money from us over 4 years. We'll just use the policy's value as collateral. We'll pay the interest along the way so the interest doesn't get added to the loan balance. But when you graduate, you're going to pay us back over the next 15 years. At maybe a lower rate to start and then a higher amount as your career progresses. And now that loan principal for mom and dad is getting paid down over the next 20 something years by their children. And then that entire value becomes available for the parents to use in retirement. And if it's structured properly, can be turned into tax-free cash flow in retirement. And so now those same dollars that were used for college can be used for retirement. And along the way, between, say, birth and college, if that family had had an emergency, they'd have access to that money for those emergencies or those opportunities. So that dollar is doing 3 or 4 jobs over the course of a lifetime, instead of just being spent on a pair of sneakers and then it's gone forever. And so I think these are some of the ideas that people just aren't exposed to, that kind of thinking. Like, they don't know to even think about their money and their sort of their financial, the family financial timeline in that kind of long-term view, and really say, you know what, the job here is to work, earn money, capture as much of that money as possible, and turn it into wealth, and deploy that wealth in really smart ways, and likely for multi-generations. And so I don't think you can get that at the street corner stockbroker sandwich between the teriyaki shop and the dry cleaner.
Yep.
Just an opinion.
I think that was awesome. It was very detailed. Love that. So what are some other kind of pitfalls or financial fragmentation hand grenades, to use your words here, that people should be avoiding?
Yeah, a while ago, actually, this goes back to when I was a kid. My brother was a little bit destructive. And, once you see the picture of a hand grenade, if you actually see a hand grenade, you have this sort of thick metal jacket, but it's segmented, right? Kind of like in kind of vertical and horizontal segmentation. Yeah. Why? So when the little explosive goes off, all those pieces fragment and scatter all over the place and do the most damage. And he actually took an M80 firecracker and wrapped a piece of copper around it, and he had scored it, and he made himself his own hand grenade. And I just remember how much damage that he literally blew it off in the neighborhood, took out all the neighbors' windows. We got in a lot of trouble. So that left a real impression on me about hand grenades. And but that's what I see people do in their life. They are so fragmented. They get one thing from one person, one thing from another. They get something from a bank, they get something from a broker, they get something from their neighbor or friend or uncle, and everything's disjointed. Nothing's related. There's no tie-in strategy. It's not part of a plan. It's like going to the supermarket hungry. You just end up with a lot of junk food in your basket, right? And so what we try to do is not have our clients fall on this financial fragmentation hand grenade and get all blown up. We don't expect people to arrive in a conversation, kind of having done nothing, unless they're 18 years old or something. And so part of the job sometimes is to kind of take them out of that situation of being so fragmented and random. And, my work said I should start my 401k, and this one said I should do this, and this one said I should do that. So I have got all these unrelated pieces. And so by kind of stepping back and saying, okay, what are the objectives? What are the goals? What are the current resources? What are the future resources? And are there any gaps in this plan to go from point A to point B? And get people on the right track in each of the major areas. So for example, we want to make sure that their savings and protection plans are right, so that they, if they should suffer a loss to, say, their physical property, their home or their car or something, it can be repaired or replaced. Very simple. We want to make sure that they are protected from things like lawsuits. So take care of some of these basic financial loss risk, right? Prevent the preventable. These are easy things to prevent. But for example, people don't have often enough what's called liability insurance. And so you do something dumb. Your friend texts you on the phone and you think you should respond to it while you're driving on a dark, rainy night, and you don't see somebody step off a sidewalk into the crosswalk, and you hit them with your car and you disable them. And now you're on the hook for a few $1 million, and, a quarter of your wages are going to be garnished for 20 years. Well, that's pretty financially ruinous. You could solve that problem for the cost of a pizza. And so we want to make sure that people are not missing the easy to fill gaps in sort of the risk management plan. We want to make sure their income is fully protected and that they have an income loss replacement plan in place. And so if there's an income interruption, they can withstand and recover from that. And then we want to work on their goals. We want to, take care of the defensive and then work on the offense. We want to make sure they're achieving their goals. things like college and retirement and buying a home or second home, starting a business. And then just along the way, make sure they're paying the least amount in taxes, make sure they're dealing with things like inflation and market risks if they're exposed to that. And I think a big thing for especially a lot of parents is the issue of legacy. What am I doing to help my children get a better leg up during their life? And then, ultimately when they're adults and we're gone, can we enhance the lives of our children and our grandchildren? And so I think instead of having this fragmented, scattered plan, I think something that's more cohesive and comprehensive, and having one person really understand all the pieces globally and comprehensively, rather than having 10 people just having a teeny little piece and nobody knows what everybody else is doing. And it just turns into a mess, and you end up with that fragmentation and essentially blown up and kind of messy. So we don't want people to do that.
Yeah, and I can tell you, I was there last year. I was exactly that. So I had, I'd read a book and then go have a conversation with my CPA, or read a book and then go talk to my lawyer about, hey, we need to set up my entities a certain way. And, it turned out that I was going to my lawyer and they're kind of in their little silo. And then I was going to my CPA and they're in their little silo, and my bookkeeper, but nobody was cross talking. Nobody had, kind of my same plan. So it's me. I'm sitting here trying to educate the lawyer on how I want this thing structured and for the best tax benefits, and then going to my CPA. I'm like, okay, I want to structure it like this for the best liability protection as well, because they're only looking at it from their lens. Like CPA is obviously looking at for taxes, but not looking at the liability side. So I'm trying to play like the middleman. I'm like, I'm not qualified to do this. Right. I read a book or listened to, a small video series I bought, and I'm trying to put this together, and I got just overwhelmed with it. So then I had to upgrade, kind of who I was doing business with. And then I found I don't know, if more like a kind of family office type thing of where it's just like one-stop shop. They have the CPA, the lawyer, the financial advisor, all kind of on the same call, and everybody's on the same page. Everybody knows what the roadmap is, and they know what their piece of that puzzle is. And it has been hugely, beneficial for just my sanity. if not anything else, just my sanity.
I think for your listeners' benefits, family financial offices, you have to have a certain level of net worth and wealth to be able to play in that world. But we can certainly operate for most clients in the same spirit. And, there's no problem with getting somebody's attorney and CPA and insurance agent or whoever, all these people on the call at the same time, and just saying, hey, let's get on the same page with this client. And I like to establish collaborative relationships with those folks, not competitive relationships, because we're not in competition. I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a CPA. But I think the thing that's really interesting is that people just don't know that they even should be doing. I mean, some of the things you mentioned, people may not even know what you're talking about, let alone know they should be doing or could be doing. It depends on what their stage of life is. And, are they a W-2 employee working for somebody else? Are they an entrepreneur, a business owner? What are they doing in their life? One of the things that I see a lot, and I know that a lot of times you guys talk about, sort of passive investing and how to increase that. And I think there's a lot of things that happen under people's noses that they just don't know that's going on. They don't know there's all these people doing these things that are, I don't even want to say not traditional. You're just not exposed to it. And
especially if you didn't come from that kind of,
if you're not, family's not oriented that way. Yeah. My family was not any, I had no money exposure in my family at all. I mean, mostly just complaints about not having any.
Yeah.
But I'll give you it's kind of a specific example where you just don't think about stuff. And I think lately we've all been exposed to this supply chain idea. Like where does the stuff we get come from? And people didn't realize how complicated it was and how fragile it was and everything. So right now, gasoline prices are, going crazy, and people are kind of trying to be mini economists and trying to figure out why and everything. Well, there's a certain entity that is doing really, really, really well all the time, regardless of the price of oil and regardless of the price of gasoline at the pump, that most people never think of because they don't really see it. They might see it a little bit if they live in certain areas in certain states. So oil gets delivered to a refinery. The refinery turns that into gasoline and diesel fuel and some other components that get made into other products that use petroleum-based chemicals, a lot of chemicals, fertilizer, things like that. Well, that stuff has to get somewhere. And in many cases, it's put into storage tanks and then it's transported via pipelines. Well, there are very large companies that own those pipelines. They've spent billions of dollars buying the land, putting the pipelines in place, managing them, running them. They get fees from the entities that are involved at both ends of that pipeline to have their products flow through the pipeline. And those are called midstream energy companies. It's in the middle between the refinery and the gas pump, midstream, right? Well, those are very, very, very steady businesses. They get those fees regardless. They couldn't care less. Just we're paying for access, right? So you can buy, you mentioned exchange traded funds before, ETF, an ETF that owns those things. Great cash flow, very stable. They can be a little volatile, but you're generally not going to sell a business that, pays some fantastic dividend and really is never going to go out of style. They're not going to go out of style until they figure out how to electrify the entire company. So I use it as an example because you're not sitting there thinking about the pipeline that gets the oil, the refined gasoline from the refinery to your local neighborhood gas pump, but there are people making a tremendous amount of money being in the middle of that. And as an investor, you can do that. And so there's lots of things like that. There are real estate funds where people who are very, very, very experienced in knowing which properties, in which locations, what business mix of those properties that you have, commercial properties, whether it's office buildings or retail complexes, things like that, where you can be having other really smart people saying, hey, these are the good things to buy. These are the good things to own. You're just going to be a partial owner of that. There are, any number of things that you can be doing that aren't necessarily just, sort of riding the S&P 500 up and down, today it's up 1,000, tomorrow it's down 1,000. I'm like, really? In a day it changed? And I think the problem is Wall Street's kind of rigged to take your money and then go play with it. And then they're the ones who are doing all this highly volatile trading that are creating these big market swings. Joe Lunchbucket going to his job, dutifully putting some money away in his 401k, isn't sitting there on a computer trading and causing these things. It's somebody on Wall Street with a computer program that's trading billions of dollars in a fraction of a second to try and catch some little price difference, and we're all affected by it. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think everybody should have all of their, especially retirement money, tied up just in those kind of familiar things that are in your 401k. There's a lot of other things that you can be doing, a lot of other strategies. And frankly, you can be putting floors underneath your money where when things go up, you make money. Maybe not all the money that was available to make, but a lot of it. And then when things go down, you don't go down. Things just stay level. So when things go up, you get part of it, maybe not all of it. But when things go down here, you just stay level and have sort of a flat. And now all of your money is available. So whatever you've made, you've kept. And then all of your money now is available to go back up the next time things go up. And I think a lot of people are kind of sick and tired of the roller coaster, especially the plummeting declines. And the marketplace has responded with strategies that allow you to capture a good part of the upside, not experience the downside. And that's the key to investing, is not losing money, right? And yet, if people allow themselves to suffer big losses, it can take years to recover from those. Well, we don't have infinite amounts of time to go from point A to point B. And so we really need to kind of try to step off that roller coaster as much as we can. And so I would encourage your listeners to really think about, do I really have to just, hope and pray things come back, 4, 5, 6 times in my lifetime? Or is there, are there other ways to do that? So I'm kind of letting them know there are. Again, no specific advice here, but just more, again, exposure to what's possible, and then do your research, ask a lot of questions, and see if things fit you, if they're appropriate.
No, that's very good. And I think my takeaway from that is, if you're not having these conversations in the groups you're in now, maybe it's your family circle, because like you said, a lot of people, I didn't grow up with a lot of money either. It's like we weren't having these type of conversations, right? At my house, and or your group of friends, or coworkers and everything. If you're not having these type of conversations, maybe you need to have at least one group of people you associate with that are. You need to have an elevated group of peers, or just get into different rooms, go out to like different mastermind groups or networking groups that people are having these discussions and masterminding, brainstorming ways to elevate themselves and and their families with strategies like this. So again, if you don't come from a background or a family or situation where you're having these topics normally, make it an effort. If anything out of this show is to get into a new room, get into a new conversation with people that are, and you'll be very, very surprised about the level that other people you may not have ever had a conversation about with. They're like, oh yeah, we do all that. Just well, why you haven't told me? We've never come up. Like I didn't associate you with kind of financial conversation. So get into the right room is my foot stomp on there. So as we kind of wind down the show here, what advice do you have for your 20-year-old self? And what were you doing at that time?
That's an interesting question. I think of people, you go to high school and it's all about getting into college. You get into college, it's all about, okay, where are you going to get a job? I think the quote, now I'm old enough to say the kids today, right? I think the kids today that are stepping off the conventional wisdom train and they're really questioning, is college really the only path to success? It used to be. I'm not sure it is today. I think for certain professions, I mean, we don't want a doctor that didn't go to college or medical school, but I think, for example, there's a real resurgence and a recognition that the tradespeople are incredibly valuable. I think we saw this during the pandemic that there's just certain trades that we still need, and the fact that we've shipped all our manufacturing overseas, there's sort of maybe we should bring some of that back here and figure out how to make that work. But I think number one, go travel. I didn't travel enough. I don't have any money. I didn't do that. I didn't really travel until I was older in life, and travel, see other countries, see other people. First of all, appreciate what we have in this country. I think it's really easy when every 20 feet there's a McDonald's and a grocery store to understand that a very large portion of the world spends a good part of their day just trying to figure out how they're going to eat or how they're going to have clean water. And I think one of the things I think parents could do even earlier in children's lives when they're old enough to at least understand a little bit is just show them parts of the world that are not wealthy and have them really appreciate what we have. I think not everybody needs to go to college and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on an education they could have gotten into community college pretty close. I think the resurgence of trades, whether that's welding or plumbing or, I think there are people who are coming out of the trade schools with no debt, maybe even a scholarship from a company who put them through that, and having six-figure jobs, and the ones who are entrepreneurial, starting companies that, become 10, 20, 30, $40 million companies and never had a college degree. So I think as a society, we need to really expand our thought process about what success really looks like and make sure everybody has an opportunity. And I really believe that the college thing has gotten out of control, the cost. And then, when you look at the number of, for example, lawyers in law school now, it's more than the lawyers that are practicing today. There's no jobs for them. So, you're going to go through, 8 years of school and all that money, and then you're going to go do something else. I think that's kind of silly. I wish I had been told, you probably wish you had been told, Vincent, that time is your greatest commodity. If there's one piece of advice I could leave the 20-year-old with, start saving early. Small amounts of money compounded over long periods of time produce massive piles of money later. The longer you wait, the more money you're going to have to put aside to get to the same, end result. And so start saving early. I wish somebody had told me that. Keep it simple. You can just buy that S&P 500 ETF and just sit on it. And if you let that go for 40 years, you're going to turn around and you're going to have, also probably a big pile of money. I think people don't necessarily get into real estate early enough in their life. I think that if there's a way to buy into, say, like a real estate investment trust or anything that could get you exposed to that asset class early in life. Real estate has built most of the fortunes or a lot of the fortunes in the country. I think what you said earlier was really, I was thinking when you were talking about the people you hang out with, really think about the people you hang out with, right? Are you hanging out with your high school buddies? Are you hanging out with your college frat buddies? Or are you really hanging out with, they say you're a reflection of the 5 people you hang out with the most. Really think about who you spend time with. And are they negative? Are they positive? Are they striving? Or are they just kind of hanging back? Are they more interested in shopping and drinking? And I'm not trying to be derogatory here. I'm just saying you can spend 10 years sort of hanging on to college, right? I want to keep in that party mode, and you could waste some pretty key years doing some pretty silly stuff. Or I'm really impressed with some of the people I'll see on YouTube or TikTok or whatever, who are pretty young people, early to mid 20s, who are really crushing it, who are just out there self-educating, jumping into things, starting small, building things up. And by the way, I'm not talking about influencers. I'm talking about people who are, investing and becoming money smart. And one of the things that's interesting about social media is that I think it's just exposing more people to, hey, I can self-educate. I can learn some stuff here, and I can take some action that's going to put me in a much better position than maybe my parents were much earlier in my life. And so I guess I would say is read, learn. God, I sound like an old guy. Read, learn, expose yourself to good thinking, and then try to have a little bit of a small advisory group of people you trust. I think you were alluding to that earlier, not just outside groups with strangers. I mean, really close to you, people that you can really feel like you can bounce ideas off of. I have a couple of close friends where I go, what do you think of this? And they'll call me up and what do you think of this? And we give each other just perspectives. And sometimes it's validation, sometimes it's rejection, sometimes it's, have you thought of this or have you heard of that? And I think that's a really good way to approach things. And so I try to have influence on younger people because I didn't have it, and so I think anytime you can get somebody a leg up, I think that's just a good thing to do in general. And I think you guys are doing that as well.
Absolutely. Very good response there. So I think we're running out of time here. So I guess right before we go into the fire round, how can people reach out to you if they've liked what you've said here on this show? How can people get in touch with you?
Sure. I have a very, you probably could tell I have a bias against, just sort of making recommendations to people. And so if you go to the website, which is just wealthdefensegroup.com, really easy, wealthdefensegroup.com, you can kind of check out the philosophy that's shared there and how we do things. There, you'll see there's a little list or a little form on the bottom where you can kind of check off topics that are of interest to you and pop that out. And we'll get back to you. If anybody listening is a business owner, we put a survey, sort of a self-quiz, I guess. So if you went to wealthdefensegroup.com/BOBS, like the guy's name with an S, so BOBS, it stands for Business Owner Blind Spots. Because I think there's some special blind spots for businesses that even go beyond what are blind spots for the individuals. There's a lot of things that business owners, while they're busy trying to build their business, completely miss. And it's both on one side dangerous, and the other side, they're not taking advantage of some unique things that are exclusively available for business owners, certain retirement plan access, certain ways to structure employee benefits in a certain way, certain legal structures, like you were alluding to before, certain legal protections that are really essential. And so wealthdefensegroup.com/BOBS, I think would be interesting for those. And just happy to help anybody who would just like to have a conversation and wants to be sort of serious about success. That's always a tough one to say.
I love it. Okay. It's fire round, right? And same questions we ask everybody. And this first thing that comes to mind. So, ready?
These always make me nervous.
What is, you'll do great. What is the best book you recommend other than Rich Dad Poor Dad?
I really like the book Profit First if you're a business owner. Profit First takes the idea of just not consuming all the money you make in overhead and really saying, I'm going to pay myself first. And since I believe that individuals should pay themselves first before they pay any bills or debts or whatever, I think businesses tend to fail there miserably. And so the book Profit First is really pretty powerful in that regard.
Got it. Okay. What is your superpower?
Curiosity. I just want to know. I just want to know what people are thinking, what they're feeling, what their backgrounds are. I don't know, like if you hover on a website and you get this little pop-up about something, I just wish people had a pop-up. Like, what's their story? What's going on? What's the background? Where do those things come from? So I think I'm just generally really curious and ask good questions. And I've actually had friends of mine say, I've never had people ask the questions you ask. And I'm like, well, because I really want to know. So I guess curiosity would be my superpower.
Good. It's a good one. What is the biggest lesson you've learned over your career?
Time heals all wounds. We tend to get really wrapped up in the short term and kind of forget history. And I remember when Jon Stewart had his show, The Daily Show, and somebody's saying something now, and then they'll come on and find a clip of them saying the exact opposite thing in the past. If you look at the financial world, there's been cycles. There always have been, there always will be, and I'm talking about for hundreds of years. Time is something that tends to fix a lot of problems. So I would just say things that are happening right now in the news in the short term, don't sweat it so much. Just stay the course. If you're on a good path, stay there. Check it out once in a while, but don't get all freaked out by what happens on Thursday. It doesn't really matter.
Got it. All right. And then last question. For the busy working professional who is working toward their financial freedom, what advice or tips do you have for them?
Oh, that's easy. Again, number one, pay yourself first. Stop putting everybody ahead of you. Stop putting everything from the electric company to the car finance company. Pay yourself first. I would say the simplest rule to follow is when you get money, plan to spend a third on your life and lifestyle, save a third, invest a third. That may be different for people. The percentages might shift, but really think about deploying your money both for your current life and to some degree your future life. The toughest thing for people to do is defer gratification, myself included, right? Mm-hmm. And so Amazon's dangerous for me because it's instant gratification. But if you can just say, okay, if I make $1,000, I'm going to live on a third or even 50%. Let's just say I'm going to live on 50%. I'm going to save 25% and I'm going to invest 25%. Those people will be wildly successful compared to just about anybody else. So if you just say, follow the 50, 25, 25 rule and stick with that for a long time and be disciplined and diligent and make good decisions about where that money goes, I think you'll be doing really well.
Yeah. And there's what's that? The Richest Man in Babylon. So if you want to hear that advice in story form, the Richest Man in Babylon is a great parable to that exact concept. A great advice there. All right. Well, that's all we have. You've been a outstanding guest. Thank you for all the wisdom and advice and just conversation on this show. And looking forward to seeing you again in the future sometime.
Awesome. Thanks for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot, Vincent.
Absolutely. All right. See you next time. All right. That was a great episode with Barry. Tons of knowledge, tons of wisdom from the 28 years of financial advocacy and experience that he has of education and mentorship and things like that through his company and just being in the market and some of the foot stomps that I have that I took away from that. I'm going to reiterate again is, watch out for your blind spots, look for those financial traps that people fall into. And it's a lot of because they don't know that they're even falling into a trap. They're just trying to follow the conventional wisdom or do what their parents did or do what their coworkers do or do what they, over some family member that whether it's, get a job, get a career and, pump money into a mutual fund or a employer sponsored 401k. And that's the only path there is to success. And then realize that you get to the end of the road there and you don't have enough to even retire because you did conventional actions and you got conventional outcomes, which is most of the people in America don't have enough to for retirement, and they don't even realize they don't have enough for retirement until they're well into their 50s or something like that. That realize that they're short a lot, and now they don't have time on their side. So his view of being a contrarian, of maybe you should question the conventional methods of doing things, because there's probably a motive behind them, which is, obviously the famous analogy there of the what is it, the mouse and the wheel thing, like that, right? You're stuck on the treadmill. So look for those blind spots. Try to find those traps, and how do you get out of those? You ask better questions. And I think that's just a great philosophy to have, is to just ask better questions. If you don't have the group of people around you that are living life a certain way, or are setting themselves up then for the future, then you need to get yourself into a different room, a different group of people, and that are making these moves for them, for their families, and maybe have been exposed to that, or are doing the self-education. So ask better questions and get into a better room, or a new room, and a new conversation with new peers that are making these moves, that are talking about these things, because that's really the only way that you're going to improve your business, improve your financial future. So great advice, and we'll see you next time.